1번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은?
Thus, individuals of many resident species, confronted with the fitness benefits of control over a productive breeding site, may be forced to balance costs in the form of lower non-breeding survivorship. By remaining in the specific habitat where highest breeding success occurs, resident bird habitat selection is seemingly a straightforward process in which a young, dispersing individual moves until it finds a place where it can compete successfully to satisfy its needs. Initially, these needs include only food and shelter. However, eventually, the young must locate, identify, and settle in a habitat that satisfies not only survivorship but reproductive needs as well. In some cases, the habitat that provides the best opportunity for survival may not be the same habitat as the one that provides for highest reproductive capacity, because of requirements specific to the reproductive period. Migrants, however, are free to choose the optimal habitat for survival during the non-breeding season and for reproduction during the breeding season. Thus, habitat selection during these different periods can be quite different for migrants, as opposed to residents, even among closely related species.
정답 4번. 2번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은? 3점.
Note that copyright covers the expression of an idea and not the idea itself. Designers draw on their experience of design when approaching a new project. This includes the use of previous designs that they know work, both designs that they have created themselves and those that others have created. Others' creations often spark inspiration that also leads to new ideas and innovation. This is well known and understood. However, the expression of an idea is protected by copyright, and people who infringe on that copyright can be taken to court and prosecuted. This means, for example, that while there are numerous smartphones all with similar functionality, this does not represent an infringement of copyright as the idea has been expressed in different ways. And it is the expression that has been copyrighted. Copyright is free and is automatically invested in the author, for instance, the writer of a book or a programmer who develops a program, unless they sign the copyright over to someone else.
정답 4번. 3번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은? 3점.
Rather, it evolved naturally as certain devices were found in practice to be both workable and useful. Film has no grammar. There are, however, some vaguely defined rules of usage in cinematic language, and the syntax of film, its systematic arrangement, orders these rules and indicates relationships among them. As with written and spoken languages, it is important to remember that the syntax of film is a result of its usage, not a determinant of it. There is nothing preordained about film syntax. Like the syntax of written and spoken language, the syntax of film is an organic development, descriptive rather than prescriptive. And it has changed considerably over the years. Hollywood grammar may sound laughable now, but during the 30s, 40s, and early 50s it was an accurate model of the way Hollywood films were constructed.
정답 4번. 4번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은? 3점.
That is because when you recall a real memory, you begin to re-experience some of the emotion from that event. There are several broad differences in the way that liars and truth-tellers discuss events. One difference is that liars say less overall than truth-tellers. If you are telling the truth, the details of what happened are obvious. If you are lying, it is not easy to conjure up lots of details. Interestingly, truth-tellers talk less about their emotions than liars do. As a result, that emotion feels obvious to you, and would be obvious to anyone watching you. If you are lying, though, you don't really experience that emotion, so you describe it instead. Truth-tellers also talk about themselves more than liars, because people telling the truth are more focused on their own memories than liars are, who are also thinking about how their story is being perceived by others.
정답 3번. 5번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은? 3점.
These constraints may be helpful to facilitate agreement, as they put pressure on parties to come to agreement. Any negotiation is bounded in terms of time. allocated to it, and time constraints are especially important when it comes to constitutional negotiations. Constitutions are typically, though not always, adopted in moments of high political drama, perhaps even violent crisis. Often there are upstream constraints that limit the amount of time available to drafters. Deadlines that are exogenously fixed and cannot be evaded, but they also bound the negotiation and prevent the parties from spelling out a complete set of arrangements. And so the constitutional bargain will of necessity be incomplete. Negotiators may focus only on the largest, most salient issues, leaving more minor ones unresolved. Time pressures contribute to the introduction of structural mistakes in the constitutional text, seeding pitfalls for the immediate post-constitution making period.
정답 3번. 6번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은 3점.
At the same time, the lack of knowledge proved to be important for stabilizing political and social order. Power and knowledge, as well as ignorance, are interconnected in a productive and constitutive relationship. Rulers know that power cannot be executed without knowledge. Mortality tables, tax data, and the like are crucial to running an effective public administration. And conquerors have understood that information is essential for dominating a territory. Since the 20th century, Western societies have defined themselves as knowledge societies, where knowledge is essential for social organization and productivity. For instance, secrets were essential to creating legitimacy in the early modern period, when individuals believed the world was created and ruled by divine power. By concealing the circumstances of their decisions, rulers cultivated a special aura that set them apart from ordinary people and made them seem more like unknowable gods. The complementary relationship between knowledge and ignorance is perhaps most exposed in transitional societies, seeking to first disrupt and then stabilize social and political order.
정답 3번. 7번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은 3점.
By a fortunate coincidence, elements and materials that we use in large amounts need less natural concentration than those that we use in small amounts. Ore deposits represent work that nature does for us. For instance, Earth's crust contains an average of about 55 ppm parts per million of copper, whereas copper ore deposits must contain about 5,000 ppm 0.5% copper before we can mine them. Thus, geologic processes need to concentrate the average copper content of the crust by about 100 times to make a copper ore deposit that we can use. We then use industrial processes to convert copper ore into pure copper metal, an increase of about 200 times. Thus, we are likely to have larger deposits of mineral commodities that we use in large amounts. As long as energy costs remain high, the relation between work that we can afford to do and work that we expect nature to do will control the lower limit of natural concentrations that we can exploit. And this puts very real limits on our global mineral resources.
정답 4번. 8번. 글의 흐름으로 보아 주어진 문장이 들어가기에 가장 적절한 곳은 3점.
Charred bones or even carbon deposits from an ancient campfire can be informative documents to people who know how to read them. The evolutionary history of a species or a disease is like any other kind of history. There is no experiment, in the usual sense, that we can do now to decide how long ago our ancestors first started to use fires for cooking or other purposes, and what subsequent evolutionary effects that change may have had. History can be investigated only by examining the records it has left. Likewise, the chemical structure of proteins and DNA may be read to reveal relationships among now strikingly different organisms. Until a time machine is invented, we will not be able to go back and watch the evolution of major traits. But we can nonetheless reconstruct prehistoric events by the records they left in fossils. Carbon traces, structures, and behavioral tendencies, as well as protein and DNA structures. Even when we cannot reconstruct the history of a trait, we can often still be confident that it was shaped by natural selection.
정답 3번.